Hey everybody, this is Cody McGee with the City of Auburndale, Director of Parks and Recreation. This year's Hurricane Expo we weren't able to have due to the COVID restrictions and us trying to stay safe, but we wanted to do is bring you several videos on hurricane preparedness. And one of the first videos we're going to bring to you is an interview with Juli Marquez with Bay News 9. Hey Julie, how are you?
I'm great, Cody. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We're getting Julie right as she walks off the stage doing the morning news. So we're pretty excited about that. But let's just dive right in. And there's a couple of things that I found out as I was looking up some information about you. And next year is going to be your 20th year with Bay News 9.
I came down here in 2002 for my first interview, and I was hired, and I've been here for, yes, almost 20 years. Been through a lot of storms, not only our daily thunderstorms, but tropical storms and hurricanes.
That's too cool. I also found out that you are a certified hurricane awareness instructor, and you've been doing hurricane expos with the City of Auburndale for several years. And that's not something I've ever been able to plug before, but that's so cool to be able to have that information.
A lot of things that we do back here is we're always trying to stay up to date on the latest information. Anything new that's coming out, we want to learn about it, we want to know about it, because then that way we're just able to give that information to everyone else and share it with everyone. It's important, I think. Preparation is the key, and if you're prepared, then you're less panicked when and if something happens.
Absolutely. And there's so many people that are coming into the state of Florida that have never lived here before, have never been through a hurricane season. And a lot of that can bring some animosity and some fear into that. And to be able to have that information to kind of teach people or give people some insight on what to expect, that's such a great thing for the community.
There are so many people moving to Florida, right? I mean, we're hearing that in the news all the time. So one of the things we have to remember is that if you're new to the area and it is your first hurricane season, it can be overwhelming because you're trying to figure out, okay, where do I go? What am I supposed to do with my house? What am I going to do with my kids? How am I going to plan around my job? Those sorts of things. So I always tell people when they first are starting this season, it's their first one in Florida, is to know your place, like know your neighborhood. So in Polk County, of course, we're not going to evacuate for a storm surge like we would if you lived near Tampa Bay or if you lived on either side or either coast. But you do have to worry about inland flooding because hurricanes and tropical storms can bring a lot of rain and can cause flooding. You have to worry about wind damage. You have to worry about tornadoes. Those are the things in Polk County that we worry about when we have any kind of a tropical threat.
Yeah, it's such a good thing to know kind of where you're at, what you need to do. And I think Bay News 9 and all of our local correspondents have done such a great job at really driving home that community feel to get that information out. So before we get too deep into it, let's have some conversation about hurricanes. So hurricane season's June 1 to November 30th. We've already started it. And I always feel like October, when you get October, you're kind of on the end. But last year we saw some late season events going on. So what should we be looking for as the season starts? I know we have a lot of amateur meteorologists out there who love to talk about what to look for and what's out there, but what's really something that we need to look for as the season starts going?
Okay, so the month of June, what we're looking for is generally any development in the Caribbean, especially the Western Caribbean, in the Gulf of Mexico, sometimes toward the east coast of Florida. Typically in the beginning of the season, you would get a tropical storm, certainly something you have to watch. It doesn't always impact Florida directly, but every once in a while you're going to see an area highlighted on one of the tropical maps where it's possible that there could be some development. So that's what we're watching for at the beginning of the season. Toward the middle, toward the end of the season, part of the season is about the middle of August through the middle of October. That's when we are watching the Atlantic carefully because then we get those waves to come off the coast of Africa. Those are the type of hurricanes that can be those category 3 or higher, and those are the ones that will track across the Atlantic. Sometimes they curve before they even move toward the United States. Other times they make it into the Caribbean. Sometimes Florida's in a cone, and everyone is different. So that's why I always tell people in the beginning of the season, when it's not active, it's the best time to prepare because we've all learned lessons in the past. We might have waited a little bit too long to get some supplies or to we'll do some work around our house, and then we're kind of panicking or in long lines and it's hot out, and that's the last thing that you want to do, wait until the last minute. So do some of that work now while it's quiet.
Absolutely. When you got time, it's easy. You don't have lines. Nobody's running out of things. It's a good time to start preparing. So last season was a pretty hectic season. We had a lot of storms going on, but nothing really hit Florida, right? That was so crazy. We went through all the names, didn't we? Oh, I think we had to start over. That's
And then we went to the Greek alphabet,
right.
and we went through those, and a lot of people said, wow, Florida was so lucky, but then of course we had Ada toward the end of the season, and that was the one that managed to stay offshore the west coast of Florida. So in Polk County, there wasn't an impact like we had like back in 2004, as you know, Cody, where we had all the hurricanes crisscrossing the state, and that year was, I think, the year for Polk County that a lot of residents always remember. If you say Charlie, Francis, Jean, those three hurricanes from 2004, that's what a lot of people in Polk County remember.
I think for at least for my generation, because I was in high school when those went over Polk County. I think that's kind of the pinnacle of when hurricane season starts. You automatically start thinking about that year, and oh my goodness, we were out of power for so long. There was so much wind damage. Be prepared. We need to have generators. We need to have all these things.
Absolutely. And I always tell people, if you're new, whether you're new to Florida or you're just new to a certain neighborhood, get to know some of your neighbors who have been living there for a while, because they're the ones who are going to know exactly how their community was able to withstand some of those hurricanes. Maybe there's a route they were going to take out and it flooded. Or maybe they live in a community where after 2004, a lot of people got together and said, okay, let's trim our trees before next year. Or maybe we're going to work on our roof the next year. We have a couple of things that you can do. And I think when you're talking to your neighbors, a lot of them have really good advice on what to do if the power goes out. And like you said, it's out for days or sometimes a week.
Yeah, that's great advice. Talking to your neighbors, the people who have been here, have gone through it, and know what's going on. That's great advice. Well, so this year's gearing up. I know I've already seen several storms over in the Pacific and one or two possibilities in the Caribbean. Are you expecting a big season this year?
Well, the prediction is for an above average season. And while we're not expecting the numbers like we had last year, we try not to focus too much on the exact number when we're talking about a forecast, because when you recall back in the early 90s, we had Hurricane Andrew, the devastating Category 5 hurricane in South Florida. But technically, there were not a lot of named storms that year, but that's the name everyone remembers in Florida, Hurricane Andrew. Then you might have other seasons that have a lot of activity and a lot of named storms. But if they don't impact Florida, then years later, it's not really a season you're going to remember. So each year we prepare the same way, whether it's going to be an active season or predicted or not, because you just want to be ready in case something happens. Definitely don't want to wait till the last minute.
Sure. No, I mean, that's great. There's been so many storms, I think last year and the year before, that kind of passed us, but ended up hitting up near North Carolina and that northern East Coast. And I don't even remember the name of the storms. I think the only storm that I remember that didn't directly hit us was Katrina, but that was just such a big storm.
Right. There are certainly some that we'll never forget, right?
Right.
I mean, those are the ones that unfortunately caused so many deaths and so much destruction. We never want to see that. And it's important to remind people that, you and I have talked in years past about spaghetti plots and the cone and trying to predict what way or how strong a storm is going to be. Each one's different. So we're here to just help people get through it, right? So you'll see a cone and you'll think, okay, this is coming here, and if I'm not in the cone, then I'm fine. That's not always the case. There are impacts away from the cone. The same thing when you're looking at a spaghetti model plot, and you see all these lines everywhere, and we have to remind people each line on the map represents a computer model. If they're in agreement, then you have higher confidence that something's going to happen. If they're kind of all over the place and we call it looking like a bowl of spaghetti, then that means that they're not in agreement. So maybe we have to wait a little while longer to see the conditions and see how the storm is initiating in order to get a better idea of the future track. During the harder hurricane season, you really need to be watchful in the morning when you wake up, maybe in the middle part of the day, certainly before you go to bed at night, especially if there's something that's going to be getting close to us. That's when we start to see a lot of people pay a lot more attention, of course.
Sure. I'm glad you brought up spaghetti plots because that's kind of one of the iconic things about hurricane season. And I love seeing there's one picture that always pops up where it's got every spaghetti plot from every hurricane ever, and that's this year's track. And I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is with social media being so much more prevalent with not just teenagers or the younger generations, but the older generations. When we're looking at those spaghetti models, we tend to start sharing or seeing old information. So a spaghetti model that's 3 or 4 days old, and the Facebooks from the weather channels are trying to push out those spaghetti models as much as possible. Do you have any advice for people when those storms are coming, really how to be prepared or what they're looking for, especially on social media, for those spaghetti models or those predictions?
The first thing I would say is, what's the source? And really, we should be asking ourselves that with almost anything that we read online nowadays, right? Where did this information come from? Did it come from a trusted source? The second thing is what we've been trying to do here at Spectrum Bay News 9 is trying to put the date and the time on certain maps that you see so that when people see it, like you said, sometimes somebody's sharing something and it's 2 days later. And when you're talking about tracking a tropical storm or hurricane, that could be really old information. So you want to make sure that you're getting up-to-date information. So before you forward something along to your whole family or all your friends, everyone in your contacts, make sure that you have the latest information and it's from a reliable source.
Sure. Well, let's talk about what storm's coming. We know it's going to hit somewhere around Florida. What's something that you would suggest to be prepared for? What are some of the things that we need to be, maybe we need to be paying a little bit more attention to the news reports? What are some steps that we need to be taking?
The very first thing is have a plan for your family. If you live in a mobile home, you're likely going to have to leave if there's a big threat of wind damage. If you live in an area that's prone to flooding, then you might want to leave. If you're not, and you have a well-built home, then you want to make sure that you have enough supplies for your whole family, pretty much we say for a week, enough food and water. Make sure that you realize you're likely going to be without power from time to time. So do you have the flashlights and the batteries? Do you have a can opener and non-perishable foods? You can make sure that you have all of your prescriptions ready, make sure that your pets are taken care of, and of course, insurance, paperwork, anything that you think you're going to need should be in one place. And then that way, you're not panicking later on saying, well, I know I put the papers here, and you might have a file cabinet over there, and then you might have some papers over here. Make sure it's all in one spot. Make it easy for yourself.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to move into some more information that may be a little bit more focused on you personally. And I know for myself, when hurricane season starts, I get a rush. I get excited about storms. I hate damage and I hate having to go through all of the post-hurricane things. But when a storm's coming, there's just a sense of excitement. As a meteorologist, do you get a little excited or get a little bit of a rush when a higher category storm's headed in any direction?
I would say that when we're watching something, I'm fascinated by the weather, right? I mean, I have seen hurricanes in the past that have grown. I'll be at work and I'll go home and I'll check in later in the day, and something went from a tropical storm to a major hurricane in such a short amount of time, right? I might come in the next morning and all of a sudden something that was a 60-mile-per-hour storm is now a hurricane. Or the track might be changing a little bit because we're getting better model data, or the hurricane hunter sampled the storm, and we got all this more reliable information to base our forecast off of. So I'm always fascinated by the weather. I never want to see anyone get hit or destruction And I have heard people say, oh, well, we could use a good, hurricane around here. No, because if you've actually lived through one and you've had to rebuild, or you've been without power for a week and it's the middle of the summer, you're miserable. And it's so hard to rebuild from that. So we don't ever want to see anything hit anywhere. A lot of times people say, well, maybe it'll be a fish storm. If you hear that, they're referring to a storm that might be coming across the Atlantic, but it turns and it curves before it hits land. So certainly that is better for us than it would be if it came right into the Caribbean or even into the Gulf of Mexico.
We see it's kind of a fun Florida joke. If you see a weatherman or a Weather Channel guy in your area, the weather is going to be bad. How do you guys, when you guys are tasked to go out and talk about the weather in the storm, how do you stay safe? How do you feel about that, being out there in the middle of where you're telling us not to be?
Well, we have crews that have been trained to do this. They are in constant communication with us back here. So if we have a meteorologist or some reporters who are on the coast and they're photographers, we're telling them where the storm is, where the best places to set up, how to stay safe. Sometimes they move. That happened when we had a couple of those hurricanes that rushed the East Coast, and of course the Panhandle storm. What we do is we let our crews know what has been changing. We make sure they're in a safe place. If it's not safe, they're leaving. We would never put anyone in a position where they would be fearful for themselves to be outside.
You've been covering weather in Florida for almost 20 years now. What do you think is the either the best or the worst storm that you've ever covered before?
I would say one of the most memorable ones for myself looking back was Hurricane Charlie, because I was on the air when it made landfall. And I remember the anxiety, the days leading up to it, because the forecast was it could have been anywhere up the west coast of Florida. And I remember not only working long hours here, but you have to get your family ready too, and you're trying to get your own house ready, and you can barely sleep because you're preparing for everything. Driving into work that morning was like a ghost town. There was no one on the road. The evacuations had been issued, so a lot of people left. And I came into work not knowing at the time if I was going to come home to my house or not, or what it was going to look like afterwards. We sleep here, we all take turns being on the air and working, but we take turns and some breaks as well, and everyone's in it together back here because our main job is to give everyone the latest information, help everyone to get through the storm. And then I remember, of course, the next day after, and you might remember this too, Cody, we had all those tornadoes that happened the day after Charlie. And so not only in your area are you dealing with all this damage, but now we have a day of severe weather, and people couldn't really just get out and just start working all day the very next day. It took several days for some people to even be able to assess what's the damage like in my house or in my neighborhood.
It was almost like having two eyes. So you had a calming, and then the storm got again, and then the storm was over, but then all of a sudden there was another storm, and it was just a never ending, especially if you consider that whole 3 or 4 months period is just storm after storm after storm. Every time you clean up a tree, you got to clean up another tree.
Right, and some people remember they just had some of their windows that were boarded all the time for about a month or so, because then we had Francis and we had Jean, and those came at us from the East Coast, and they moved again right through Polk County. We were just, everyone was exhausted at the end of that season.
Absolutely.
A long time to rebuild. Some people, boy, they couldn't even fix their houses completely until later that year, if not the next year.
Yeah, I think there was a blue tarp. You could see blue tarps on roofs for so long. There was so many people that didn't have electricity from the first storm to the last storm. that they just were constantly back and forth out of electricity. So, actually kudos to all the electricians or the electric companies that were working so hard trying to get everybody squared away, because that was a rough time.
I always tell people, and it's happened to all of us in just a general summer. Your air conditioning all of a sudden goes out, and you might be without power for 4 hours, sometimes it's a day, right? And you know how hot it is, and you can't sleep well, and you can't use your refrigerator. You don't want to open your refrigerator. And I tell people, now imagine taking that and having that be 3 days, then 5 days, then 9 days, and it's just day after day to have to live through that is just so hard to do. And that's when we really need to rely on our neighbors, and we need to be a good neighbor too. If you see someone who is really struggling and you're able to help them, then let's help them.
Absolutely. Well, we've hit on it a couple of times, and one of the last questions I'm going to ask is just talking about evacuations. And sometimes you'll see that true Floridian when evacuations come up, and no, I'm not leaving my house, or on the reverse side when people start talking about evacuations, and it may not be where that particular person lives, and they're wanting to flee the state because a storm's coming. What is a true barometer of how we're supposed to react and how we're supposed to feel when we start talking about evacuations?
The number one thing is you have to listen to the orders that are given, right? And the reason evacuation orders are given is because of the threat of storm surge. So if you live at the coast or you live near Tampa Bay, then there is that possibility. If you don't, and in Polk County, a lot of times you're not ordered to evacuate, although if you live in a mobile home, certainly you want to leave depending on the storm. But one of the things we want to do is make sure that if we are going to leave, remembering that you don't have to travel far to another state. Sometimes you can be safe staying with family or friends. Other times you might want to go to a shelter. It's really a last resort. There's nothing comfortable about being in a shelter. You're in a shelter with other people, everyone's scared, you're trying to remember everything to bring. Some of them allow pets, some don't. Special needs shelters, you have to register ahead of time. There's a lot of planning that comes with that. If you're going to stay home, then you just want to make sure that your house is going to be sturdy enough and that you have enough supplies for a week in order to really get through that 1 week period.
Well, very cool. So my last question is going to be, a storm's headed this way or a storm's already here. What do we need to do? Where do we need to be finding our information? Where do we need to be tuning into? What's the equipment that we need? How can we get our best information?
Well, here at Spectrum Bay News 9, as you know, we're going to be on the air the whole time to help you through a storm. You can always go through apps. We have our Spectrum News app, and you'll be able to get the live streaming there. We have updates on our Facebook and our Twitter pages, of course. Our website, baynews9.com, will have all the latest information. There's a Storm Season 2021 page on there right now, and you're able to get specific information for your county. So you get all of the information about evacuations and what shelters might be near you, remembering important papers and documents and what you might need before, during, or after a storm. And of course, we have our radio partners in Polk County as well. So on our Spectrum News app or on our website, if you go to the 2021 page, you'll see our hurricane guide. And when you click on that link, Cody, you'll be able to see a list of our radio partners. And I remember when we had Hurricane Irma a couple of years ago, some people lost power and they said they were able to turn on the radio and listen to our partners because they were simulcasting our coverage.
That's great. So one of the important things, I think, especially in your prepared bag for hurricanes, is to make sure you have an actual radio with batteries to spare, because one of those crucial things back in '04 is when the power went out, we lost TV and we lost internet. We lost the ability to see the news on the TV, and the only way to grab that was through a radio. And it's while that may be kind of an old school thing, we definitely need to have that in our preparedness.
Right, that's the backup that you would need to have to get the latest information. A lot of people recently, of course, have been also purchasing some of those battery cell phone chargers. You know, remember in '04, people were going out to their car and they'd start their car and they would try to charge their cell phone that way. But now if you have one of those lying around some of those paths, you might want to get one for your family. You can at least charge your cell phone and be able to use it only in an emergency, but that's kind of that critical lifeline that we need after a storm to know what's going on.
Perfect. Well, Julie Marquez, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate all the information about this year's hurricane season. Although we didn't have a Hurricane Expo, I think we still covered a lot of information with you today. Is there anything that you'd like us to say before we sign off?
I just like to tell people that, you know, we don't have to stress right away in the beginning of the season. This is really the time to prepare so that you're not stressed later on. And we're going to be here with you throughout the whole season, as you mentioned, Cody. It's all the way through November. So we have 6 months that we're going to be watching something, and we will, of course, be keeping you up to date on that throughout the whole season, the next 6 months.
Perfect. Well, it's Cody McGee, the City of Auburndale Parks and Recreation, speaking with Julie Marquez about the hurricane season for 2021. Miss Julie, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. And guys, keep looking for some more videos about hurricane preparedness as we bring it throughout the month. We'll see you guys later. Have a good day.